Firstly, the developments around the South African currency.
Yes.
We have seen it stronger earlier, and it was out of the excitement that, we have the oil price plummeting, and there was a truce on the trade war deals and so forth. What is causing this movement?
Sure, I must say, very happy to be here away from my screens in the office where I'm seeing the sea of red. Look, there's a number of things. We had that truce, as you indicated, on Monday, where China and the US had emerged from those talks over the weekend, which came out and they were very positive, for the global economy. They announced that they have 90 days to try and sort out the issues regarding trade. Now, it looks like, that was short-lived. We had a very strong run on Monday. But then Tuesday, it all fell off. We started seeing a lot of negativity on Tuesday, including Wednesday. The US was closed on Wednesday. But of course, we continued to see a lot of negativities across the globe. Today, we had the current account deficit that came out and also coming in worse than expected. So those are the number of factors that have led to now the rand trading slightly above 14 rand. So there's been a lot of negativity. I mean, you look at the lira as well in Turkey, under pressure. You look at a number of other emerging market currencies, definitely under a lot of pressure. So it's a risk of trade.
Okay, so it comes as a surprise because, the good news were that the country has come out of recession. And looking at the backdrop of the performance of the rand, especially with the graph that we have, that at the beginning of the year, it was at some stage trading at 11 rand 59, 11 rand 64, and it ended up at 15 rand or so. So now having this exciting news, because the Ramaphoria dissipated, and then there was this minus 2.2% demise of the South African economy. When the GDP figures come, and then we're out of the technical recession or out of the recession, shouldn't this spell really a positive news and confidence in the markets?
Look, it does, and it should, I think, to a larger degree. But, it's difficult to read too much on one number and one quarter. If you look at the number of things that have now happened, is that even today we had a load shedding. We've got a number of other things that have gone worse in this new quarter where Eskom is continuously cutting electricity. Now, if you now look at what impacts of what that does to this sector, such as manufacturing, for instance, a number of other sectors that are really getting negatively affected by this stop and go in terms of the electricity supply. Those are some of the negatives that we really need to caution against and say, while the GDP numbers in the third quarter, came out positive. And also remember, we came off a very low base. If you've been not growing and in fact registering a negative growth, it's very difficult, it's very easy to register a 2.2% GDP growth because you're coming off a low base. But I think it's still very early to really get excited about this economy. There's still a lot of challenges.
The good news for the consumers, the petrol price
has been dropped by 184 cents. But when I look at the direction of the rand right now, and I look at, I hear what is taking place in Vienna with the OPEC meetings, that they now want to cut production, which will then lead to a higher oil price. I say it's still very early to get excited.
Now, if we shouldn't get excited, do you feel that there's going to be, earlier you alluded to the problems at Eskom regarding load shedding. Do you think there's going to be an anticlimax in as far as sustaining this higher than expected GDP figure?
Eskom is the largest threat to our economy. They're already talking about transferring 100 billion away from their balance sheet to the government balance sheet. Now that will push, our debt to GDP level. It will probably at around about 2 percentage points. We already have the rating agencies that are saying that debt to GDP is extremely high. We need to contain it. And Eskom is suggesting that they can shift the liability like that. So Eskom is the biggest threat, not only from the fact that we've got so many guarantees against it, but also the fact that we cannot have a reliable electricity supply. It is negative for the economy.
So for the day, we saw that the Dow Jones and the Hang Seng on the international front, the markets have been falling. What is causing that?
Look, I think from an international perspective is all the issues relating to the trade war until such time that we actually have these two powerhouses, the number one and number two, which is the US and China, really coming into an agreement about the way forward. we are always going to, experience this sort of volatility in our economies and in our markets, because it creates so much uncertainty. When the two giants are fighting, the rest of the world suffers.
When the markets are risky, there would be a trend that develops for the safe havens to be looked into. But at the moment, gold is not as it would usually be. For the past 3 years, you and I have been tracking it, and we referred to it having to get some gains during this time. But this has not been the case. What is happening?
No, certainly. I mean, gold has disappointed. And I think with a number of other things that we've had, which is the uncertainty. Gold usually performs very well, as you allude to that fact. That fact that as a safe haven buying historically, it has been well supported. But we haven't seen that reaction. In fact, yesterday we saw palladium jump above the price of gold. So that tells you that there is that that disconnect in terms of how gold should actually be responding to these uncertainty. But also, I think the fact that there's just not inflation. The other driver of gold is a hedge against inflation. And if you look across the world, we have benign inflation, and we haven't seen that inflation. That's perhaps the reason why we haven't seen the opportunity to jump into gold.
All right. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Maudi Lentsoane is a managing director of Lehumo Capital, speaking to us about economic trends. We take a break, and when we come back, the program continues.